I'd like to jump in and talk about firm Wacc versus project Wacc. So firm weighted average cost of capital is going to be used for evaluating typical projects, whereas a project Wacc would be used in the instances where we evaluate atypical projects. Up to this point, we've evaluated Wacc as a weighted average cost of capital across the firm's entire financing source. So thinking of a firm as a portfolio of projects and products, we see that Wacc will be weighted average cost of capital across the portfolio. So then we ask ourselves, can a firm utilize its firm-wide Wacc to evaluate the firm's newly proposed projects? And quite frankly, it depends. So again, the firm-wide Wacc is evaluating for typical projects. And can we use that firm-wide Wacc to evaluate for new projects? We can if it falls within the same typical projects that the company is already in. So for instance, if John Deere were to open a new dealership, something that they're in the business of, and they've done multiple times, they could very well get their firm Wacc and utilize that as a typical project. When the instance we want to use a project Wacc would be those atypical instances, when those are high or low risk. So let's say AT&T wanted to invest in Bitcoin. That's atypical of what they normally do, a telecommunications company getting into the cryptocurrency game. So they would want to use a project Wacc specific for that project to weight their opportunities. Now we have our risk-appropriate Wacc. So if we were to take a look at a risk-appropriate Wacc, it was as on the graph here, say theoretically this is a firm that is an all-equity firm. The risk versus return on the risk-appropriate Wacc is listed in this security market line. Now, if I were to evaluate typical projects, the firm-wide Wacc is this yellow line here. Let's say it's 12%, whereas the risk-appropriate Wacc is the security market line, the blue line. So if we have multiple projects the company is evaluating, if it's just using the firm Wacc, both project B and project C are above that return of the firm-wide Wacc. So using that firm-wide Wacc, those projects will be accepted. However, the security market line, the risk-appropriate Wacc, we see that project C is actually below that risk-appropriate line, it being more risky than what the return would allow or qualify for. If we look at projects A and D that fall below that firm-wide Wacc, we see that project A actually returns a positive return for the level of risk involved in the project, whereas project D falls underneath that firm-wide Wacc and below the risk-appropriate Wacc. Now I wanted to pull up and use this graph to show the detriment of just utilizing the firm-wide Wacc for the initiation of projects. Now I'd like to get in and demonstrate a couple problems here. This might be a little tough projecting, so I'm just going to kind of go through the problems through the PowerPoint here. But these are problems in the back of the book, chapter 11, numbers 25 and 26. So problem number 25 here. An all-equity firm is considering the projects shown below. The T-bill rate is 4%. The market risk premium is 7%. If the firm uses its current Wacc of 12% to evaluate these projects, if any will be incorrectly rejected. So the first piece of that question, using the firm's Wacc of 12% as the internal rate of return benchmark, project A would be rejected. You see that because its expected return is 8%, which falls below their firm-wide Wacc. Now we would use our expected return formula to come up with the expected returns on these projects. Project A would have a 5.4% return, Project B a 13.8% return, Project C a 9.6% return, and Project D a 13.1% return. Now if Project A is expected return of 8%, would have been compared with the project-specific required return of 5.4%, it would have been accepted. Therefore, Project A was incorrectly rejected. Now moving on to problem 1126. This is an all-equity firm, very similar to the one in 1125. T-bill rate is 4%. The market risk is 7%. The firm-wide WACC of 12%. And this being all used to evaluate the projects. So again, project A, we see expected return of 8%, project B 19%, C 13%, and D 17%, with their respective betas calculated there. Now, using the firm's wide WACC of 12% as the internal rate of return, project A would have been rejected. And projects B, C, and D would have been accepted. Again, we're using our expected return formula here, expected rate of return. Project A, 7.5% return. Project B, a 12.4% return. Project C, a 13.8% return. And Project D, a 15.2% return. Now, if Project C's expected return of 13% had been compared to the project-specific required return of 13.8%, it would have been accepted or rejected. Therefore, Project C was incorrectly accepted.